Welcome to Replatform TV, the YouTube channel for the popular Replatform podcast, available on all popular platforms including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Hosted by myself, Paul Rogers, and fellow experienced e-commerce consultant James Gurd, we'll provide regular deep dives into important e-commerce topics with practical advice for getting results and improving your site performance.
Thanks again for joining us on Replatform TV. Today's episode is around product page content, optimizing content to drive add to cart rates and conversion, and also boosting SEO. So a couple of kind of facts and trends and some key shopper frustrations before we go into our top 10 tips. So I think the key thing, for those who are new to e-commerce and store management, product page is a critical part of your conversion funnel. This is both from people browsing through the site who get into product journeys, but also those coming direct from your marketing campaigns into a product page where you, especially from paid media, where you want to get that add to basket and conversion. The design of a product page is influenced by complexity of your product, its price point, the product category it's in, how much info you need to provide. So a lot of these tips will be kind of generic tips that can be applied into any product type. According to Hubspot, content supported by relevant quality photos gets up to 94% more views than content that's not. So product visual imagery is critical. Baymard does a lot of UX research, and they've done a lot of research around product pages and product content. They found the average e-commerce site has 24 unresolved structural product page issues, and that only 18% of e-commerce sites have an acceptable or good UX performance on product pages. So pretty damn an indication that product pages have a lot of work to do and areas for improvement. So with that in mind, Paul, what do you think are the key shopper frustrations that e-commerce teams need to think about?
So lack of clarity from a title and image perspective, and just generally kind of not being able to find the information you need and differentiate between different products. General kind of usability as well. So actually adding to cart, configuration, etc. Image quality as well. So not being able to kind of get that context from the imagery. And then just confusion from a kind of design perspective.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that context one's critical. I read some Baymard research. They have a shopper panel, and they found around 40% of shoppers won't even consider a product on a list page if the image isn't contextually relevant. So getting the product image right on the product page influences the list page as well. So right, with that in mind, let's talk about our top 10 tips. And again, we're not saying this is exhaustive. There are loads of ways you can improve product pages. We're picking out 10 key ones based on projects that we've worked on where we've seen results. So my first one is optimizing product titles. So this is often the first thing people see. So it's got to be bold, clear. It's got to be relevant. So the copy has got to be relevant to the customer to tell them what that product is and does. And if you have different types of product in one category, clearly differentiate, whether that's on color or size, for example. The second important thing is align it with the shopper language. Don't just use the language that your business uses internally. Look at external search engines like Google, Bing, or whatever your local market search engine is. Look at the search query data on your own website. What language do shoppers use when they try and find products? Do you need to tweak that? Having worked with brands like Mars, they've done a lot of testing over the years with online grocers on getting the labels and language in right so that A, their products resonate with the customer, but B, they get found in more relevant search queries in the on-site search. And the second thing linked to that is test shorter and longer titles. Can you get a better add to basket rate by a longer title that is more explicit? Or does adding longer titles actually confuse people and slow them down? Because what you find with a longer title, you get more keywords in, that can boost your on-site search visibility for that product. But you've got to make sure it doesn't impact negatively your UX on the product page. So that's my first one, Paul. What's yours?
Yeah, absolutely. So images and videos and different approaches. So to start off with, you need to ensure that you're kind of creating enough context around the product. So we've talked about the importance of context, but you're kind of focusing your imagery on the right kind of features and areas of the product. And then you should test different approaches to imagery and kind of the positioning of imagery, and also things like image size as well, which I think can be really important, particularly in fashion. User-generated content. So we're going to come on to this further on. Later on, but visual user-generated content can be great for, again, creating more context around size and bringing lifestyle imagery into the page, which can often be, or a lot of people don't have due to the costs around kind of developing lifestyle imagery at a product level. Recently, I've really bought into 360s. So they're not new. They've been around for ages, but I think 3D imagery can, again, create more context, but also they're really nice from a kind of usability and engagement perspective. And I think engagement is something that's got a lot more important since the kind of pandemic and people really trying to differentiate from other brands and resellers and everything else. We're doing a lot of AR at the moment, and I think that's something that can be great as well. So we've got 2 luggage retailers we're working with at the moment, and AR is great for kind of, again, that whole size piece, but also just to be able to, again, more engaging, create more context. And I think it's a really nice area to invest in. And also, there's a lot of use cases for having 3D renders as well of your product. And I think that's kind of becoming more important. A good example, so Adidas just invested in AR for their whole product catalog for their app, and this will likely roll out online. And this is a really nice use case, and it's really nicely done as well. So you can really get context around what the shoes look like as part of an outfit. And then Herschel's a really nice example on their store. And then just a couple of other points. So test pack shots versus lifestyle imagery and things like that. And that's a good example of something that you should kind of build into a continuous optimization process. And then James has added a note here around how Hyundai used VWO to run tests around imagery and how an increase in the size of imagery and how that led to an increase of test drives by 62%. And I think that's another one to think about as well. That's something like fashion brands in particular, like really getting the most out of the product image.
Yeah, 360 is a good one because actually the cost of doing that, you're right, I mean, it's come down quite rapidly now. There's more technology out there.
Absolutely.
Available. A good example in the luxury ones, Rimowa. So Rimowa and their product select and personalize it all. You can properly flip the suitcase around in all angles, not just a standard rotational, in the same way that if you picked it up in a store and lifted it up and round. So more complex and more expensive to do, but really cool example. Excellent. So my next one is making maximum use of attribute data. So product attributes, this could be color, size. In online grocery, it's things like dietary requirements, things that are gluten-free, etc., nut-free. You can boost search matching with smart attributes on your product page. So there's 2 bits here. Number 1 is contextual information to users on the product page to help them know about the product so they can make an informed decision and buy it. Secondly, is that those attributes can be indexed for your on-site search engine to help you match that product against specific attribute-based queries. The other thing that you can do, and links back to Paul's point around images, is where you've got a specific attribute that's like a USP, that maybe it's exclusive to you, or maybe it's like won an award, you can add badges onto the images to flag that as well. So you can link the 2 things together. AO.com does attributes, I think, quite nicely in a complex product for electricals. They have a big table. You can look on the specification. It's a long list of attributes with the name value pairs alongside it. So different executions depending on how many attributes you've got. A lot of people just do bullet points. But another good example, AO.com, in their key features they pull out at the top, the bullets become hyperlinked so that you can create additional pop-ups for video related to that specific attribute. So it's a really nice way of knitting the content together.
Great. And then now user-generated content. So we talked a little bit about this earlier, but I think it's an important one. So visual user-generated content, so both including kind of imagery and video within product reviews and incentivizing, or at least giving the user the option to include that as part of a review. Curated Instagram is really commonly used nowadays, really easy to implement, and can add a lot of value. And again, really good from an engagement perspective. And I'd recommend splitting it out. So a lot of people tend to include it within a single widget, whereas most of the vendors you can use that do all forms of user-generated content you can actually split out the widget into separate blocks, which works a lot better in my opinion. Product reviews, so ideally you'd have an inline implementation from an SEO perspective, so server side, rather than using JavaScript. Even though Google's got a lot better with JavaScript, most SEOs would still prefer a server-side implementation, and a lot of the other search engines still can't crawl JavaScript. you want to make the reviews as descriptive as possible. You should be split testing different questions to achieve that. And then from a UX perspective, I really like the customer profiling and the ability to filter reviews based on customer characteristics and things like use cases as well, which can work really nicely. Premium brands generally hate product reviews. So we work a lot with premium brands, and I've really struggled to get brands bought into product reviews, but it can be done nicely. So Patagonia and Everlane are great examples of kind of clean, well-designed review widgets, and they've generally got less product reviews on the page, but they're positioned very nicely, and then they'll have a call to action to view the rest. But it can be done. And then the other thing I would say is on top of that, or on the same kind of lines, be creative with the reviews widget. Like, so many people use a default Yotpo widget or a Kendo widget or Bazaar Voice widget, whereas you can do a lot more with these kind of SDKs these days. Parachute, Home, Patagonia, and Glossier are really nice examples of that, but there's loads of other ones. And then in terms of vendors, so I really like working with Yotpo because it's got a really broad feature set. It's got a good API in terms of doing that whole server-side piece. The integrations are really nicely built out. And then I also really like Kendo if you're working with Shopify.
Fantastic. Yeah. And on the luxury brands reviews, I've seen good gains in testing on premium brands where they've tested service reviews, taking reviews from something out of Trustpilot. And instead of doing product reviews, which they're more nervous about, they showcase a testimonial that's relevant to that product category and the product within it to help give social proof. So different ways to definitely. My next one is enriching product content with Q&A blocks on the page. So there are two benefits. Number one is on the page, you provide useful content to the customers. You help tackle common questions or potential barriers to purchase and give them the confidence to buy. And secondly, you're enriching the page with better content, might help you from an SEO with kind of longer tail Q&A based queries. There are tools out there where you can find out the types of questions people are asking related to a product or a category. Answer the Public is a great one. SEO tools like SEMrush. There are many out there, other SEO tools as well. Search based on your product name or your category and look at the questions being asked. The other bit is check internally, your customer service team or whoever's looking after live chat. What are the typical inquiries you get at product level? What are the questions people ask that you're not answering already? Plug gaps and write helpful content. That's the key thing, write helpful content. Don't chuck it on there just to get Q&A stuff so you can tick a box. Make sure you're addressing known pain points or challenges from customers. The other a good example actually in the US, there's a website called RV Upgrade Store. So it's basically loads of products for people with big RVs. They use AnswerBase, which is a specialist Q&A platform, but they embed the Q&A content into the page to boost that product content. So well worth exploring with, and make sure you use consider markup for Q&A because there is structured data markup for Q&A blocks.
Right, so leading nicely onto my section, which is structured data. So it's important to make sure that you add structured data and really consider how the page and the site has been built around that as well. So for example, things like multi-currency can have a big impact on price markup. So it's really important that you consider that. And just factor that into your strategy or any kind of other influences like that. Structured data can also have a negative impact on paid channels if it's done incorrectly as well. So things like if you mark up your prices on your product recommendations and all of that kind of stuff, it can cause feed disapprovals. So it's really important to kind of make sure that all structured data has been implemented correctly. And then the core markup that you should really have on the PDP includes things like price, product name, long description, brand, condition, any variant info, product reviews, etc. And you can either implement that within the theme or you can use JSON, which a lot of SEOs seem to prefer. And then, like I say, I think it's just important to be mindful of things like multi-currency and then Google crawling from the US, which can cause issues. So that's just something to be aware of.
Fantastic. And as for a lot of people in a lot of markets, Google is the kind of main volume share for search. You can use their free structured data checker in Search Console. So my next one is persistent CTA, call to action. So make sure your add to bag button is constantly visible on the page. So when somebody lands on the page, have it visible so people can do a quick ad if they're ready to buy. If you've got a long form content page and people are scrolling, use pinned navigation with the add to basket button highly visible. I've seen brands like Gavashi, the jewelers, test this really well, and they've got the same pattern on desktop and mobile. It's pinned to the bottom. It shows the product price, title, and add to basket. So also think about, if you have a complex product with lots of additional product information, like your specifications tab, you've got reviews tab, whatever it might be, use quick links in that pin nav as well to help people if they want to get back to a specific bit of information, speed up that journey. The more you speed up the journey and minimize the effort to try and find and solve problems and answer questions, typically the higher your add to cart rate will be. And the other bit is test the style of this button. A/B testing can be more sophisticated than just testing color and style, but color and style can have an impact on visibility of that button.
Right. And then my next one is content structure, and I guess like rich content in general, and text content on a PDP. So overall, I think if you're a brand in particular, but this applies to all types of retailers really, I think the days of just a really long description are over. And I think kind of, positioning content in that way where it's just a really big block of text doesn't work as well from a conversion rate perspective. And there's almost like an expectation now that, content will be split out into different blocks and different fields in the back end. And a lot of the kind of, particularly the high growth D2C brands, have done a really nice job of kind of creating that kind of phased rich content on the PDP and kind of pulling out key features and having kind of visual content alongside text content. And again, just making those templates more engaging. So some really nice examples include Allbirds, On Running, David Austin, Patagonia, Made.com. Patch is a really nice example. And I think they're a good example of really considered PDP content generally. The only thing to be mindful of is just how this works in things like data feeds, but that can be manipulated and you can kind of aggregate those together. And then ideally you'll really kind of, test and develop which features need to be called out and then how you position those.
Excellent. And related to that, one thing that people should think about is doing checks for legibility of copy. And there are some free tools out there. There are some more sophisticated paid tools. For something like readable.com, you can just do a simple legibility check. Can people actually make sense of what you've written, even if the copy sounds brilliant to you? My final one is persuasion tactics. Paul's already covered user-generated content, social proof of reviews. So I'm going to talk about things like fear of missing out. FOMO, fear of missing out, is a proven psychological phenomenon. We are capricious human beings who are driven by impulse, whether we like it or not. The most important thing with persuasion is don't mislead or press gang. You're not trying to force somebody to do something they'll later regret, buyer's remorse. That will just cause you more problems down the line and also drive up your returns. But it's about using correct information and showcase it to people to encourage them to take an action so that they don't miss out. A good example is low stock. If somebody's considering an item, but it's run out of stock, just tell them. This doesn't mean stick a low stock warning on every single product. You will devalue the message only when there genuinely is low stock. So you need to have a good, accurate stock feed to make that worthwhile. If you're worried about the stock accuracy, then another way of doing it is to showcase popularity. So things like sold 30 times in the last 24 hours. It demonstrates that there is some velocity and interest from other people in there. Another good example is like next day delivery countdown. A lot of time people put a next day delivery message like order by 7 p.m. But I've seen tests with clients where they turned it into a countdown timer for the next day delivery cutoff, and that's had a bigger impact in driving people to add to cart. Another thing is authority badges. Like if you've won an award, again, I've seen testing where people have put authority symbols into their product page and it's had an impact. Even as simple things like putting a registered or a trademark symbol in product titles. One example for you, another good case study from VWO, Visual Website Optimizer, Express Watches, UK online watch retailer. They A/B tested changing the message on images from never beaten on price to Seiko authorized dealer site. And they had an increase in sales by creating that persuasion from an authority point of view rather than their generic never beaten on price message.
Great. One thing on that as well that I've seen work quite well is if you're a multi-brand retailer, really pushing some things like price matching and price competitive messaging for Google Shopping traffic. So kind of personalizing it based on the traffic source. And we've seen that work well with a couple of clients. My next one is variant handling or product configuration. So this is a big area at the moment. Seems to be a big trend of people kind of investing in this area and allowing for more kind of customization and configuration of product, particularly with brands going direct consumer and kind of allowing people to personalize, customize, kind of doing things like product builders as well. So it's pretty common if you've got a configurable product or a product that requires a lot of kind of customization input to kind of take it out of the platform now, or kind of extend the native functionality using like React or Vue. So this helps to kind of speed up the process. It'll allow you to manipulate the data better. And it's also nicer from a front end user experience perspective generally. Also, if you're using a platform like Shopify, it helps to get around the variant limit. If you're using Magento, it will give you kind of performance benefit over using configurable products. And a couple of good examples include Revant Optics, who's a company we've worked with a little bit. And then Senrive as well is a good Shopify example in the US. This gives you a bit more flexibility and freedom in terms of how things work on the front end. You'll need a kind of good developer to work with you on it, but it's generally like a nicer, cleaner approach, I would say. Another good example is Parachute Home, which is a headless Shopify site. And then Interior Define is another really nice example of configurable experience generally. So they've kind of phased the configuration for their sofas and chairs. Another big trend is extending this further and going down the kind of 3D builder route. So Tileco, Hellmade, and they're both really good examples of this. And then two less obvious use cases. So Hellmade is kind of custom helmets. Tileco is like cupboards or furniture. Wristband.com and JPress are really nice examples that are slightly less obvious. So JPress is kind of build your own shirt. And again, that's kind of built in a nice 3D way using FreeKit. And then wristband.com, you can build your own lanyard, which is a non-obvious use case that works really nicely. And then FreeKit, Cylindro, and Smart Pixels are three good vendors that we've worked with recently that can all kind of help to achieve that more complex experience. And then also add on things like AR and give you a bit more kind of back-end control over things.
Fantastic. So we've shared a ton of practical tips as always. What's your key takeaway, Paul?
Yeah, so I guess be creative with the PDP. I think, ultimately, your product page is probably going to be your most important template in terms of actually selling the product. And I think just try and think differently, take inspiration from a lot of these kind of D2C brands that are being a bit more creative with how they structure product data and the information they're giving, and then kind of really focus on engagement and, any additional functionality that can give you an edge and sell the product better and, make the experience better for the user.
Cool. And mine is find the right template for each product type. So if you've got a diverse product set, don't just assume that the same template will work for every single product. Explore and test different layouts. So House of Fraser got some good results from that. A good example is you take like you were saying about D2C mattress brands like Lisa. They have really nice visual storytelling with really cool images that show the complexity of the product and all the different layers in the mattress in a really nice visual presentation, as well as the copy and all the attribute data. So look to brand DT direct to consumer sites. I mean, Apple's a lovely example of a good visual storytelling as well. And my favorite is Ferrari, even though I still don't own one. A couple of recommended reading. We referenced some Baymard. Go to the Baymards. They on their blog, they have lots of UX blogs. They've got one on UX product image categories, and they've got a product page usability report. I think you need to be a paid subscriber for the full report. A visual website optimizer in their blog have got lots of really cool examples and insights from tests. They've got a blog on e-commerce product page design. So thanks to them for some of the learning from there. So thanks as always for watching. We hope you can use these insights to improve your own product pages, and please share with anyone else things you think are of interest or tips that we haven't covered. We always want to hear what other people have learned. We don't have the monopoly on what's right, but please do leave comments. We're happy to continue the conversation, even if you disagree with something we've said. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you. For more information on this topic, head over to replatform.fm for our audio podcasts. To discuss a project, or if you'd like to chat about any of the topics covered in this episode in more detail, please reach out to myself, James Gurd, or my co-host Paul Rogers via LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks again for listening, and keep your ears peeled for the next episode.